Alright guys, we are back in my garage for another video, and as you guys saw, about 2 months ago, I installed an LSD on my 340i, and in this video, I just kind of want to give a review on the limited slip differential upgrade for our cars. Most of them don't come with it. It was actually a pretty expensive upgrade from BMW, so extremely rare, and now a lot of people are wondering if it's worth, getting the upgrade if they want to improve the performance on their cars. So as always, in this video, I'm going to start off just explaining how it works and what it does differently compared to the stock open diff. I'll go over some of the upgrade options that we have for our cars and talk about how you might be able to pick which one will work for you based on your goals and your budget and things like that. And then I'll give my opinion or recommendation on whether it's a worthwhile upgrade or not. Keep in mind, I'll tell you up front, it's probably not going to be the opinion that you expect, and it's not typically what people would say with an upgrade like this, but hopefully after I explain everything, you understand my perspective and why I feel the way that I feel about an LSD upgrade. So hopefully this video doesn't upset too many of you guys, and hopefully you find this video useful. Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future. So to start things off, let's talk about how differentials work. And I will have a link down in the description to a video that I think explains the differential development perfectly. It shows exactly all the different pieces that come together to make a differential work. So I highly recommend watching that. It's kind of like the simplest and easiest way to understand a differential. And it's from a super old video. It's like 100 years old, but it still explains it probably better than any other video on the internet. But that being said, a differential's primary purpose is to allow both wheels to spin at different speeds. So especially when you're going around a turn, the inside wheel and the outside wheel on that turn are going to have different distances that they need to travel. So without a differential, you're basically going to cause the tires to scrub or skip, and it's not going to have smooth operation. So by adding a differential into your drivetrain, both wheels can spin at different speeds, and as you drive or accelerate around a turn, you're not running into unwanted resistance in your drivetrain. Now, one thing to consider about the design of a differential is that it requires resistance in order for it to work effectively. So it's basically applying pressure against the resistance of the wheels, and as one wheel has less resistance than the other, the overall output changes. And that's what allows the inside wheel or the outside wheel to spin at different speeds. So this is a pretty big problem with open differentials because, for example, when you're going around a turn at a very high speed, the entire car is going to lean. And as you lean, it puts a lot of pressure on the wheel on the outside of the turn, and the wheel on the inside of the turn is going to lift slightly, and it's going to have a lot less friction and grip with the road. Now, when you run into that scenario, that inside wheel that has low friction is going to limit the total output of your open differential. So that's where you run into issues where you can't accelerate out of turns as easily, and you're not going to be able to put down the power as quickly because that open diff is limiting how much torque you can put down. I think this is a pretty common misconception because people say an open diff sends all the torque to the wheel with the least resistance, but that's not really the case. An open diff actually puts out the same amount of torque to both wheels at all times. So the big problem is you want to be able to accelerate out of that turn, but you're not going to have any traction, and thus you're not going to have enough torque to truly accelerate out of that turn and continue propelling the car forward. In a worst case scenario, your inside wheel has less traction than what the diff is actually trying to put down. And just like in a straight line, if you guys are running into wheel spin issues, the same thing can happen around a turn. So the torque is going to overwhelm that inside wheel. And even if you have the widest wheel possible, because of that dynamic when you're going around a turn and the car is leaning, is going to cause the wheel to spin, and that can cause instability in the car and cause issues where you lose traction and the car begins to spin and you're not able to control it. Now this is where a limited slip differential comes into play, because now we're going to implement a differential design that can actually bias torque to one wheel or the other. And so if you're going to have one wheel that spins faster than the other, that creates resistance inside the differential so that it can direct torque to the wheel with more traction. So now if we look back at that, example of a car kind of going around a turn with a whole lot of lean, now as the inside wheel begins to spin faster because it's losing grip, the differential is going to direct more torque to the outside wheel that has more grip so that you can continue to accelerate through and out of that turn. Now, there are a couple different types of differentials. Some of them use clutches inside of the diff to bias torque to one wheel or the other. There are also torsion differentials, which basically use the resistance between the gears to bias torque one way or the other. There are also electronic differentials, like the one that's used in the BMWs, like the F80 and the G80, and that uses an electronic controller to tell the clutches which way it should be biasing torque. So a lot of different ways that you can implement this. And they're also designed with different amounts of aggression. So depending on how much it can actually bias power one way or the other, that will control, how progressive the differential feels, how much power you can actually put down, and how much limited torque you can actually manage. So basically a more aggressive diff can still provide power at a more aggressive angle, higher speeds, and bigger yaw rates. So all of that comes into play depending on how comfortable you want the LSD to perform and also how aggressive or how much performance you want out of that differential. Now, for our cars, there are a lot of different options available. One key thing is to make sure that you are picking the right final drive ratio for your car. And that's going to be dependent on whether your car is all-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive, as well as if your car is automatic or manual. And different engine families also have different final drive ratios, so just keep that in mind if you actually want to change it. There are ways that you can do that using ISTA as well as some tuning changes, but for most cases, I just recommend sticking with the stock ratio so that you can have the easiest time making it work. The one that I went with is the Performance OEM LSD, and this is the one that, like I said, it's a really rare option because it was pretty expensive, but it's 100% plug and play. You basically just unbolt and drop the stock differential housing and then install the Performance differential housing. It doesn't require any coding, any tuning changes. It just works right out of the box. The only caveat here is it does not fit xDrive. I know some BMW sites show fitment for xDrive or show a part number for xDrive cars, but it doesn't actually work. The issue is on rear-wheel drive cars, the drivetrain components are beefier because all the power and torque is going through two wheels instead of four. So if you try to bolt up the Performance diff, your axles and stuff are going to be too small to fit inside of the housing. So at a minimum, I know you need to swap the rear-wheel drive axles, potentially the drive shaft as well, in order to make it work. And that also applies for like smaller engine cars. So if you have a 330i or something like that, they also come with the smaller hardware. So just keep that in mind. You'll probably need to swap components if you want to fit the Performance diff on an xDrive vehicle. However, there are other options that work for all vehicles, rear-wheel drive and xDrive. There are companies like Quaife and WaveTrack that will sell just the differential itself, and you can basically drop your OEM differential housing, bring it to a shop, and have it, machined and updated to install the new LSD diff. Now, this does require a lot of work. It's not really an at-home job because you are not going to be able just to unbolt the OEM diff from the housing. Everything is actually welded in place, so it requires machining to remove it, and you also need to do some drilling and tapping in order to install the new bolts that will install the aftermarket limited slip. So just keep in mind it's a pretty labor-intensive job and usually something that I recommend going to a shop that has done it before in order to have the best experience possible. Now, one thing that doesn't work is the F80 differential. A lot of people have asked me about that in the past. And because the F80 has the electronic differential, we don't have the connections for it to work. And also their rear subframe is different, so it won't actually bolt in place. You'd have to swap the entire F80 rear subframe in order to bolt in an F80 differential. So for most people, the Performance one is going to be the most budget-friendly option. The Quaife and WaveTrack are more expensive, like I said, over $3,000, and you'll have to get the service done to actually get them installed in your diff, or sometimes you can pay people to send you one already installed, but then you'll have your stock diff that you can try to sell to recoup some of those costs. I've also seen some really cheap options that you're basically supposed to be able to just screw in some springs and stuff that try to create that bias inside of your differential. I highly do not recommend going with those options. I know a few people that have broken them already, and it just really can't handle the torque and power that our cars put out. So avoid those. I know the differentials are really expensive, especially, compared to other platforms where I was able to get one for $1,000. Now everything's like 2,500 to 3,000 plus dollars. It just kind of is what it is. But I do think that it is a worthwhile upgrade for certain people. So like I said, the way that a limited slip diff works is it biases torque to one wheel or the other. And particularly when going around turns, that's going to provide the biggest benefit because you're going to see a significant difference in friction and traction from your left wheel versus your right wheel. That's not always going to be the case when you're going down a straight line. And that's where I say, personally speaking, I feel like an LSD is very useful for people that want to track their cars, but not necessarily for people that just want to drag race or roll race their cars. I immediately saw a difference when I was going around the track because I was able to put down the power a lot earlier. Even before I fully got out of the apex, I was basically foot flat on the floor, and so that extra acceleration gave me much more speed going through the straights, and I was able to carry more speed through the turns without worrying about the car losing the rear end. So it definitely provided a significant benefit there. But if you're going down a drag strip, you're not going to have a significant difference in friction between your left and your right wheel. And I think the big problem that I see in our community is people basically are hoping that an LSD can be an ultimate fix for their traction issues. I'm spinning first gear, or I'm spinning second gear, and when I put my LSD on, everything will just hook up. And it just doesn't necessarily work that way. I know a lot of drag racers obviously have limited slip diffs in their car, and there is a minimal benefit there, but I don't think it's the quick fix that most people are looking for. It's definitely not going to be as significant of an improvement as going to just a performance tire. Most people that are running fast times on our cars actually have an open diff still. They just run a really aggressive tire so that it's as sticky as possible, and that gives them the best opportunity to hook on a launch or a low speed pull. So that's really where all of your gains are going to come from. Again, it might provide a minimal improvement in straight line acceleration, but it's not going to be that quick fix that some people think it might be. Another thing to consider is it does help control the car. So if you are losing traction with an open diff, it can be a little bit more snappy and unpredictable. With an LSD, it is going to be a little bit easier to manage, and especially, people that are into drifting and stuff like that, they know a huge part of getting a limited slip diff is that control that you want. So when the car is swinging back and forth, you'll have a better time at keeping it straight and keeping it moving forward. Again, it might not show a significant improvement in performance for your times, but the car will feel better to drive. So if you're looking for that, just improved feel and improved control, it can also help with that as well. But again, I just want to say it one more time where people think that this is the key to unlocking, launching 1,000 RPM on all season tires. It's just not going to work. Now, as far as the Performance LSD, I do highly recommend it if you have it available for your car. It has very progressive performance characteristics. It has a 30% lockup on acceleration and 9% lockup on deceleration. And like I said, on the track, it worked out of the box. It was perfect. I will say it wasn't as snappy as some other differentials that I've had in the past. Like I have used a wave track differential, and it really gives you that whip around effect. In this configuration and how I was driving the car, it didn't quite give me that same sensation. And I think it's because it's not as aggressive as like a wave track, for example. Those will give you more of that feel that maybe some people are looking for and expecting when they install a limited slip differential. But even without that feeling, it still worked great. Like I said, I had way more traction. I was able to get on the throttle pedal much earlier going through turns, and it just gripped up, hooked, and went. So I think it worked really well for my needs, and for most people, it'll probably meet their needs as well. So yeah, again, I know this probably isn't the feedback that most people were expecting, because a lot of people just say, oh, if you have a certain amount of power, you need a limited slip diff. Your car is lacking if you don't have it. And I don't really feel that that's the case. My 440i is making over 600 wheel horsepower. It still has the stock open diff, and it's fine. I have an LSD ready to go on it, but I don't expect it to be a night and day difference for straight line acceleration. It really is more for driving like my 340i, where I take it to the track, focus on turns and handling, where it really gives me the biggest improvement. So yeah, I think that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.